It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All around the world, we are, and across the United States and parts of Canada, Alaska, Hawaii, Guam.
Yeah.
We're everywhere.
We are.
All right. Get right to this, because we had mentioned it. I just want to read the paragraphs of it. Hamas explains how they did it. We made them think that Hamas was busy with governing Gaza, says a senior official of Hamas. The leaders of Hamas are delighted with their murderous handiwork, and in a remarkable interview on Sunday, a senior Hamas leader explained how they did it. Here's a quote. In the past couple of years, Hamas has adopted a rational approach. It did not go into any war. It did not join the Islamic Jihad in its recent battle. Ali Baraka said in an interview that ran on Russia Today and was translated, we made them think that Hamas was busy with governing Gaza and that it wanted to focus on the 2.5 million Palestinians there and had abandoned the resistance altogether. All the while, under the table, Hamas was preparing for this big attack. End of quote. There you have it. Hamas presented the illusion that it cared about Palestinians in order to dupe Israel into putting its guard down. Then it pursued its main ambition, which is to kill as many Jews as possible. And, you know, this is where I look at the biggest domestic issue here on what had happened. There's the international issue. There's the issue inside of Israel, but there's the biggest domestic issue here on that, and that is the fact that the Biden administration, by reversing the oil embargo, funded Iran's ability to fund Hamas and Hezbollah, and we, in essence, are partly responsible for what happened because of the decisions of this administration. We know, right there, we know how brutal they are. We know how brutal Iran is to its own people.
Yep.
And I guess it's time to stop trying to solve every problem in the world and just be getting fooled by our enemies. Well, this is going to humanitarian aid, and it's to help the people of Iran because their government won't. Stop it.
Well, no, I mean, that's been the response by the left, and I think we're probably going to hear more of that. You know, if as more and more people are calling for them to refreeze the $6 billion, well, that's going to go to help the people of Iran. I mean, they've already been saying it, but I mean, I think that's their only defense position on this, and ultimately, we may learn very quickly what Andrew McCarthy points out, and that is it's likely they don't have the ability to refreeze that money. If Qatar is in control of that money, this administration's not going to go on bended knee and ask for something with the very strong possibility of being turned down and embarrassed on the international stage once again.
And so we brought it up at the beginning of the show, and our show was so long that we have people that stay with us, and we have people that, you know, and then go to sleep with us. And a lot of them can't go to sleep. But then we have a new audience that, you know, comes in as people are waking up in the morning. So we believe this is just because nobody brought this up except Andrew McCarthy. And his basic point is the whole thing from the Biden administration, from John Kirby, whoever, from Janet Yellen, whoever you hear, because Yellen apparently said the same thing, whoever is saying that we have the ability to refreeze funds, but they don't do it. The reason they're not doing it is they don't have the ability to do it. They're lying to you.
Right.
That they don't have the ability to do it because the political pressure is so great that if they had the ability, they would do that. But as Eric just pointed out, as Andrew McCarthy said, Qatar owns the funds.
Right.
They have it.
Right.
We have to ask them. And the reason that the administration hasn't asked them is because Qatar will turn them down.
Yep.
And then he'll be embarrassed. So what are they doing? They're lying that they can freeze the funds, but we choose not to do it at this time.
Yeah. Right.
Which sometimes the lie can be as bad or worse than the truth.
Yeah.
Because your fallback lie position, according to Andrew McCarthy, is, well, we could refreeze it, but we haven't made a decision on it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And you heard the question go to Karine Jean-Pierre, was it Kirby the other day, saying, well, if not now, when?
Right.
Well, blah, 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 blah. Didn't answer the question. And that's the entire point. Well, why would they be taking that position? It seems so strange to do that. Because they're lying.
Because if indeed they are, this is the case and they cannot refreeze these funds, then it shows how far they went with releasing these funds. And that, number one, that they've been lying about it, but also what a mistake it was to begin with.
Couple of things here. It says, here's the bottom line. This is from Andrew McCarthy's column. Here's the bottom line. Contrary to what Biden officials say, they know they can't refreeze the funds. Mm-hmm. After all, if they could, they would. Yeah. Iran, a designated state sponsor of terrorism under federal law for nearly 40 years, backs Hamas and patently was complicit in the October 7th atrocities, in which, quite apart from the massively murdering and savaging Israelis, Hamas killed at least 22 Americans, with at least 17 other Americans missing and likely either killed or taken hostage, along with scores of abducted Israelis. Even before Saturday, there were sanctions in place that the Biden administration purports to be enforcing. Clearly, then, given the political heat the president is feeling for putting $6 billion at Iran's disposal shortly before its proxies slaughtered our citizens and our allies, if he could freeze the funds, he would. He can't, because he lost his leverage when he waived the sanctions and transferred the funds to Iran's ally, Qatar. He would need Qatar's agreement to freeze the funds. It's so certain that Qatar would not consent that Biden won't even ask, because in this moment, being rebuffed would be too humiliating. So the administration has come up with a fairy tale, a lie. Well, we could freeze if we decided to, but there's no need to because Iran hasn't touched the money, and we can't confirm that Iran was involved in October 7th anyway. They have to say, quote, confirm, because the evidence is too overwhelming for even Joe Biden to pretend there isn't any evidence. Biden isn't confirming Iran's role either, because, and we talked about this yesterday, because if he did, he'd be expected to do something about it. And he's not asking Qatar to freeze funds, because if he did, he'd be expected to do something about it when they turned him down flat. And the same thing. Iran can't be involved in it. I mean, he got to what? Watch out to Iran yesterday about future behavior.
Be careful.
But if he tied Iran to it, then he would also he would be forced
to do something.
To do something there and also do something on the oil embargo.
Yeah.
And he's not going to do it. And as they point out that in talking about Qatar and Turkey, the other thing that Qatar, Turkey, and Iran have in common, of course, is both are sponsors of Hamas, meaning significant financial and other material support. You can see why Iran, which wrote the book on hating the West while playing the West, would form a good working alliance with Qatar, its Gulf neighbor. Indeed, that's why Iran decided that Qatar would be the perfect place for the Biden administration to park the $6 billion in South Korean oil profits. There you go. The administration has not produced any documents attesting that Qatar has committed to be directed by the United States on this matter. They're saying there's no document. There is what would you call it? No clawback clause anywhere that exists.
Right.
Again, if Qatar had agreed to be so bound, Biden would quickly direct the funds to be frozen in order to ease the growing public outrage. So the administration is not relying on a formal agreement when it claims to be able to freeze the funds. It is relying on the already existing sanctions that Biden specifically waived as to this pot of $6 billion, and of which he has generally more eased enforcement, enabling Iran to rake in a windfall of about $30 billion. Despite knowing that the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism will use a good chunk of those revenues to undermine jihad against the United States and Israel. And that's the biggest domestic story of the day.
Right.
Why are we helping terrorists? Why are we helping fund terrorism?
Every day that Iran has access to the global marketplace and is able to sell their oil is every day that they can fund these kind of atrocities even further.
I don't want to say we.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the Biden administration...
No, that's a good point. You know what? I almost caught myself...
helping the terrorists.
The other day.
It's not we.
It is the U.S. It is U.S. policy, but we need to be done with the we.
It's him. It's his administration. Why is the President of the United States helping to fund terrorists? Can any Democrat answer that question? Because that is not over-the-top rhetoric at all.
No, it isn't.
You can make a direct line that we all know is fact.
They can enforce the embargo right now. They could have done it from the beginning. They could have done it and continued it, but they weren't going to do it because Trump was doing it.
Yep.
And we're not going to do anything that Trump does. Oh, except build a wall. Here's a question. I don't expect it, but I think you have to lay out the possibility. I think it's a slim possibility, but still it is a possibility that the political pressure becomes too great. It's going to require the media repeating those questions over and over again. They're still getting funding by selling their oil when an embargo is officially in place but not being enforced by the Biden administration. Why? Why?
And here's the problem. If the Biden administration, if they say, okay, we're going to enforce the embargo, they're admitting that those funds that they got, $30 billion or more, was used for terrorism.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't stop it because that's their whole point. Well, we don't believe they're using it for terrorism. They're using other money. They're not using our money. Because they told us they won't.
Right.
God, do we look like suckers. And then yesterday, I was just so enraged when I saw Biden out there. I don't think it was in front of the White House. I don't know where it was, but he's talking about concert ticket and sports ticket fees.
Yeah. And couldn't even get the sentence out properly.
No, my God. You've got Americans that have been murdered. Americans that are
hostage.
How do
you leave that on the schedule?
I don't know. No idea. It's just so pitiful. 866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
A visit Wednesday to a Virginia elementary school to commemorate National School Lunch Week and announce
a cooperative agreement with the Urban School Food Alliance.
With Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack noting a $4.4 million investment to 18 of the nation's largest school districts.
Their job and their challenge with those resources is really to focus on procurement, on focusing on what kind of training, what kind of resources are necessary to enable school districts to take fuller advantage of local and regional food systems.
The the end result expected, according to the secretary.
This program is set up in a way in which they are to share that information. So in theory, every school district should have access to the information.
Secretary Vilsack also announced additional grant opportunities associated with USDA school meal programs.
We're announcing the ability of schools to make application for the $10 million that will be awarded in this fiscal year under our Farm to School program.
Plus applications for subgrants under the second phase of the Healthy Meals Incentives Initiative. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. There it is right there. Senate Republicans introduce a bill to freeze $6 billion in Iranian funds. I think the reason they're doing it is they have to know.
Yeah.
They have to know that the president's lying about it. And so they're saying, okay, let's put together legislation. Democrats have to vote for it. They can't sit there right now.
How do you vote against it?
Public pressure and say. And so if they got it in the Senate and then they get it through the House, does Biden veto it? Because he doesn't want to talk about it?
That's even worse. You're bringing so much attention to it. And then what do you do if you sign it? Then what? What if they were able to pass this, it gets to his desk, and he signs it? And there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, either way. Either way, you're screwed.
And I think Republicans have to know that.
See, this is why I'd hate to be a presidential spokesperson. I don't know how Kirby. Can't you get a different job? Because we've talked about our disappointment in somebody with such a long naval career. Obviously, knowing that he lies every day in big ways, and he lies about things that have to do with terrorism, that have to do with Afghanistan, that have to do with what's going on here. And I don't know how you do that every day. And the thing, maybe the line's easy. What I would hate is going into work. Because if I'm going into work today, I know this is going to burn us. And there's no way out of it.
Right.
And you walk in every day going, okay, how do we get out of this lie? Well, the media will just forget about it. I don't think they're going to forget about this one.
No, they're not. Look, the media wants answers, and the administration is not giving them any answers. Look how long. It took way too long for our president to talk about this. And then he finally brings up Iran yesterday, and I told Iran, I got a message for Iran, be careful. That didn't sound strong at all.
Yeah, it was be careful, wasn't it?
Yeah.
My God. So they're trying to cover their big, I can just see it. How come the president hasn't talked about Iran? He did. He told Iran to be careful. I can say he did that, so they have talking points for today. He mentioned Iran.
In the wake of this, before, or at least at the point he was talking to Netanyahu over the phone, he should have had a multi-tier plan already in motion. Here's what we're doing, and all of this is going to happen so that we can help protect our strongest ally.
Well, you know what I do at a point very early on, because of technology. I have him on Zoom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm the president of the United States with the president of Israel. Just to let you know, we're here. We support whatever. I mean, you want that imagery out there without question.
Right.
That should
tell
have
us
been
what
done.
you need.
Yeah.
And we'll get it to you.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Carly, and I'm Gary McNamara. You know, this hasn't got a lot of publicity just because of everything in Israel, but here's a headline. As Vice President Joe Biden emailed his brother and son about foreign business more than 29,000 times.
Wow. Wow.
That may take a back seat to everything going on now.
I don't know that I've even texted my wife of well over 3 decades 29,000 times. I'd have to go back and and count 29,000 times. Wow.
You ever get into whether it's a texting thing or a Facebook message or what's the other one? WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And you start getting into conversation, especially group texts.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're done with the day and you look at it, you're like, my God, I got to stop wasting this time. How many did we send? It's like 500 back and forth.
Well,
and you don't realize it as it's happening.
Yeah.
Like
my siblings and then the guys from Del Rio that I've known since grade school, the guys from Del Rio, we've been on a group text that goes back many, many years. I don't know how many years. It's a long thread. And I have to turn my notifications off so they don't wake me up because those guys work, during the day. And so they're texting all the time. And I don't get to spend a lot of time on it. I have to catch up later. And, but yeah, there's a ton of 29,000 emails. Holy cow. See, that tells me that's something of a critical interest and urgency.
In a joint status report published by the Washington, D.C. District Court on Friday, the National Archives and Records Administration reluctantly admitted that it knew of 4,243 emails between then Vice President Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, another 1,751 emails between Joe and Jim, 19,335 emails between Joe and Hunter's private equity firm Rosemont Seneca, and 3,738 emails between Joe and Jim's Chinese Communist Party connected consulting firm Lionhall Group. Joe, Hunter, Jim, and the firms listed in the court documents are at the center of the GOP investigation into the Biden family influence peddling operation. But let's go further with something that is really interesting, and again, this is from the Federalist.com. The U.S. money trail with Iran is worse than you think. This is really interesting. The numbers are laid out. The $6 billion you've seen in every other headline is only the money being transferred from our friends in Qatar. But this is separate from the $10 billion of assets being transferred from Iraq, which senior advisor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and former National Security Council official Richard Goldberg traces the money trail, and he confirms it's worse than we think. But that's separate from the $10 billion in assets being transferred from Iraq, which Goldberg says will continue on a rolling basis. Then there are reports that Iran will be allowed to access $7 billion in fiat currency by trading drawing rights with the International Monetary Funds. He also says Japan is scheduled to transfer $3 billion to Iran. Money is fungible, and even the funds that have not yet been unfrozen are likely being treated as good credit in Iran's ledger. The revelations do not end there. U.S. officials have also quietly acknowledged that they've uncapped Iranian oil exports to China. Those export levels previously held around 775,000 barrels per day under Trump's sanctions and are estimated at between 1.4 and 2.2 million barrels per day. Modern estimates value this relief at $25 billion. The total, $50 billion. It's giving a thug a loaded machine gun and expecting him not to shoot the bullets. Wow.
Wow.
There's going to be, I think, you get a speaker. I think that's what they're talking about right now, that all this needs to be investigated, the Biden administration, because you think about it. You think about how long this has gone on. Everyone knows. This is the thing. It's not like only Republicans are saying that Iran funds Hamas and Hezbollah. Everybody says it. Democrats, Republicans,
The Biden administration.
The Biden administration said it yesterday. John Kirby said it yesterday. So
there's no debate.
So Trump was keeping the money away from them, and you opened up the faucet of money so they can fund Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
Where do you go? Why are you doing it?
Right. The debate of whether or not it's happening is clearly over. Now the question is,
why?
Why are you allowing it?
Right. Why is it happening? And there's right here in the Federalist, Iran has never hidden its motivations. Even in the past, Iranian lawmakers proudly chanted death to America and posted it on the news. They've always told us exactly who they are, and we still make a deal with the devil. You know, that's one thing that's really come out. I've seen this meme more than anything the last 24 hours concerning this, is when they tell you they want to kill you, believe them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just rhetoric. All those questions should be over, too, because there is, look, I don't think there is a clearer picture of who the enemy is than right now. There's never been a clearer picture. Even after 9/11, I don't think people fully grasped what it was about. And now you can say clearly the evolution of who the enemy is and the tactics that they're willing to use and proudly promote, by the way.
Well, Iran was celebrating what happened.
Yep.
And so understand.
Remember the whole thing with
understand
Iran?
our enemy.
Yeah. Remember the whole thing with the death to America? Well, they don't mean actual death to America. Remember we want to wipe Israel off the map? Well, they don't mean that they actually want to wipe Israel off the map. All of those people can stand down now. The defenders of Iran, unless you're part of the regime, you just go away now.
And then this is where this gets, as we talked earlier, and the Federalist story talks about this too. It all becomes even more egregious when inspected within the context of the Biden administration's foreign and domestic policies. We're stopping oil production in America while allowing Iran to export more, all under the facade of green energy. The administration has given the green light to increase oil production in the country that is the greatest threat to the free world. Meanwhile, Biden has choked American oil production with the fewest number of offshore oil and gas leases in history. This is after Biden canceled all remaining leases in Alaska, and since these leases are for 2024 to 2029, he's pushed off America's truly feeling this at the pump until quite conveniently after the election. Squeezing the American wallet is far from the most dire consequences of this policy. Biden has drained the strategic petroleum reserves to multi-decade lows. Despite claims that they would be replenishing the reserves, the administration has not only yet to refill the reserve, they even pulled an offer at the end of the summer because of market conditions. Namely, oil is already too expensive, and we are drained of our most important backup resource. Wow, in parallel, the Biden administration has been actively working to cut the legs off a Saudi-Israel deal. After all, why would we want to encourage stability in the Middle East? And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And all this stuff is going to come to the forefront because, as we've stated, all of this is interconnected. Everything we're doing with Iran, everything we're doing with the Middle East, everything about begging dictators and dictators and monarchies, please pump more oil for us, while destroying American jobs and doing it. And as we said, how many times have we said it? It is destroying our economic security, our energy security, and our national security. And now we see the national security standpoint right here with what happened at Israel last weekend.
Yep.
And will the American people wake up and say, enough?
No, you're right. It's all interconnected. There isn't anything that doesn't apply here with all of that we face that is on the table right now. And it requires a government. It requires a president to be very, very proactive in solving this. But when you cause it and you don't care about it, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
But don't worry, we've got a president who yesterday was saying he's going to do whatever he possibly can to ensure that concert tickets and sports tickets have lower fees.
Thank goodness.
That was unbelievable. That got me angry. Yesterday.
Yeah, it is maddening.
It's just like because one of the reasons it's happening is because this is what the significant portion of the American public want.
Yeah, right.
That's what they voted for.
Yep.
When is America going to say enough is enough? This is insanity. And everything now is insanity. And it's not the fact that government can't solve problems, it's that they cause the problems.
Yes.
They create the problems.
Yes.
And think about it. The United States, the Biden administration, has filled the coffers of Iran with cash for terrorism.
Yeah.
Now our taxpayer dollars are being used to back up Israel to fight the terrorism that was financed by money that we allowed Iran to get.
Mm-hmm. And they're denying that the problem exists. Kirby actually acknowledges it's well known that Iran funds Hamas. But there's no evidence they're using that money.
Right. Well, as Matt Leeson from Associated Press. Well, what you're saying is, so you haven't got the particular serial number of the exact dollar bill that went from one place to another.
Exactly. Which is insane.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Well, we've got inflation numbers coming up today. The wholesale inflation numbers were up a little bit. And, and so the Fed met yesterday, said they'll, one time, the consensus was, they'll raise rates one more time.
They believe at least one more raise. And my question would be, all right, and what would it be, likely a quarter of a point? Then what do they expect that's going to do? And I don't know. I guess we'll see.
I think the most important thing is what's core inflation?
Right.
I think that's the most important thing because that's what people feel. And I mentioned I mentioned earlier in the show when I went to the supermarket yesterday just to get a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those things, you and I both got this wicked cold that we can't get. Well, I think it's getting better, but yesterday was the worst and had lawn work and a bunch of stuff and then said, well, let me just go and get a couple of things. $107.
Yeah.
Like, what? It's like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And it was just, I was in there less than 10 minutes and just wanted to get a few things.
Mm-hmm.
That was my mentality. And people go through that every day that don't have the expendable income that I have. How does that affect them day in and day out? It didn't seem to affect the election next year or last year. Will it affect the election next year?
I don't see how it doesn't. I think there's accumulation of a number of things, but there is financially a cumulative effect because if you're blowing through savings that's one thing, and you're saying, well, okay, I still have some in savings. Then at some point, it's not getting any better. It's not turning around, and you start cutting back, and then all of a sudden you're using credit cards and everything else, and your personal debt starts to rise, and then you wonder how you're going to pay it off, and then you're going to have to go get it. So there's this cumulative effect as those higher prices are impacting you for longer periods of time. And so that's the question. Where will that be, and how will it tip the scale, if at all, at election time? It's not going to turn around in a big way.
No,
There's not going to be anything that's going to be worth celebrating when it comes to the economy between now and 13 months from now.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.